Alright, so what's next here? We're going to move on to making the bushings. And the bushings are what give the wheels a spot to spin on and basically hold it to the cannon frame. So we need two of them, one for each wheel. And these are kind of tricky. We want them to be just right. You know, we don't want a whole lot of wobble or flex in that wheel. We want them to spin smoothly. So you've got to take extra care with our measurements and get it just right. And you don't have a lot of material. You probably have enough to get 3 out of this, so you can make 1 mistake. Also, we're going to make what we call the trunnions that the barrel can swivel on out of the 2 little brass pieces there. Okay, and just have my wheels out so that I can test fit my bushings on the actual wheel as we get those made. So let's take our bushing material. We'll place that in the chuck. I'm going to have about an inch or so sticking out of the jaws. And we want to begin by facing off the end of that. So I'm going to switch our tool post around, and we're going to need our left hand cutting tool set up so we can face that off. Have to adjust the height so it's right at the center of rotation. So what I like to do when I'm facing off is just eyeball it and get it where I think it's close, and then we need to do a test and see how close we are. This being brass, relatively soft material, we can have a faster RPM. I have a 900 RPM. That would work pretty good. I want to set my feed rate also for my cross feed rate for about 0.004 of an inch of revolution. Then we'll just take a test cut and see how our height is. Looks like I got lucky that time, and pretty much we're right at the correct height because it didn't leave any material behind at the center. So if we're happy with that, I'm just going to come and take one more light pass using the feed rate on the lathe. Cuts it off. Do about a half of the rotation on the compound. Gauge my feed rate. Okay, so we face that off. Next thing we're going to need to do is drill a 1/4 inch diameter hole. We're going to spot drill that first and then go to a 1/4 inch drill bit. Okay, so I'm going to use my spot drill first just to get a starting point for the drill bit so it goes straight. Took the live center out of the tailstock and put in the drill chuck. So I'm just going in just about the tip of that spot drill. Then I'll put my 1/4 inch drill bit in. Now here my plan is to drill deep enough so that we can get both bushings with only having to drill one hole. So I'm going to drill in about 1.25 inches or more, just so that I don't have to put the drill back in and drill it deeper later. So to figure out how deep I go, I'm just going to use the markings on the ram of the tailstock that have divisions on it as it comes out. And we just roughly are going to go 1.25 inches. Okay, there we got in probably about 1.5 inches. The deeper you get with that drill bit, the more you're going to have to back it out. You don't want to allow those chips to clog up in the flutes of the drill bit, or that's going to cause some problems. Okay, so now we've got the hole drilled. We should be done with that. And we're going to set up here to cut down the end of that to a diameter of 3/8 or 375. 375 or 3/8 should be the diameter of the hole on the wheel. So we want to be exactly 375 or maybe just slightly less than that, so the wheel will go onto it. So I'm going to switch around to my right hand cutting tool. And the important thing here is that we create a square shoulder between the two different diameters. We don't want a sloping shoulder. We want to have a nice right angle. So that means I'm going to need to swivel the cutting tool because it's sharpened at an angle. I need to swivel this so that it will be parallel with the end. Okay, so I'm going to adjust that. And a good way to do this is just bring it up to the end of your faced off bushing there and just use that as a guide so that we know we'll make a square transition. I also want to caution you that we're working up very close to the rotating chuck and we don't want to crash anything into that. So always be very careful to check your clearance to make sure nothing's going to collide while you're cutting. I also want to get the height of that cutting tool set just right. Get your grab. Okay, so we need to cut this bushing from the end to that shoulder there at a length of 0.250. Okay, we need to do that fairly accurately. So to do that, I'm going to use this dial indicator here that's on a magnetic base, and this will tell me how far my carriage has moved to the left there so that I can accurately stop at just the right place. So what I like to do here is I'm just going to, in a way, face that off again, and then I'm going to zero out my dial so that I know the tip of the cutting tool is exactly at the end of the metal. Okay, so I face that off. I'm going to turn that, so that's on 0. Now the correct distance is basically going to be 2 revolutions of that needle plus 50 more. So 250 thousandths total. Each one of those lines is 1,000th of an inch. I'm also going to set my feed rate to 0.003 or 3 thousandths of an inch per revolution on my longitudinal feed rate. And then I need to also indicate the tip of my cutting tool to the outer diameter, zero out my dial, and that's going to tell me how far I'm going in. Okay, so right now we're at a 1/2 inch diameter. We want to make it a diameter of 0.375, so that's a difference of 125 thousandths. We're going to do that in 2 cuts. We're going to take 75 off the first cut and 50 thousandths or whatever is necessary to make it the correct diameter. Okay? So I'm touching the tip of my cutting tool. Okay. I'm going to zero out my dial. Dial set on 0. I'm going to advance it 75 thousandths of an inch. Okay, then I'm going to go back to where my dial indicator is on 0. Then I'm going to engage my power feed. I'm going to watch that dial make 2 revolutions. I'm going to stop it, and I'll do the rest by hand. Right to the 50. Okay, so that was my first cut. Now I want to measure and see what I was actually cutting. So that measures 0.435. So if I do the math to get it to 375, I need to take off 55 thousandths, I believe. About 60. Oh, we'll see. So I'm going to cut it, and probably it's going to be a little big yet. Back it out at that shoulder. That should create a square shoulder there. Okay, so we're trying to get .375. So I'm at 387. So I need to go about another 12 thousandths or so. Just being real careful here, you know, you can't put the metal back on once you cut it off, so it's better to err on the side of making it too big as opposed to too small. 377. So we're not quite there. Try to just take off 2/1000 of an inch. Okay, there we got 0.374, so just slightly under, which is probably okay. We'll take a wheel, and there could be a little burr inside that hole, so we take a deburring tool and get rid of that sharp edge before you try to fit it on there. And that fits on pretty nicely, and what we're looking for is that edge of the brass should just be slightly inset, because we're going to be taking a small amount off the face of the wheel at some point, and then we want it to spin. Okay, so we don't have to force it on, but it's not sloppy loose. Okay, that's maybe a C right there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Okay, so now that you have that, we're ready to cut that off with the cutoff tool. So what I want to do is mark a 1/2 inch over from the end to where I'm going to cut that off. And I'm just going to use my cutting tool like a scribe, kind of like we did on the barrel. And we just want to measure over . 1/2 inch. Use that depth gauge. Line it up there. I'm just going to turn the lathe on. And make a scribe where I want to cut that off. Okay, now we're going to get the cutoff tool, so we'll take that out. Okay, so we have our cutoff tool, and just a thin blade in there. There's other things you could use for this as well, but this seems to be the simplest way. When I put that in there, I'm just going to use the end of the metal here. It's pretty important that the height of this is right on the center. Cuts better that way. And then I'm going to just bring it over to my scribe line. Line it up there, a 1/2 inch over. Make sure our cutting tool is to the left of our 1/2 inch line. And again, we're working up close. Want to make sure everything's going to clear. So always spin that, make sure. Okay, and we're just going to turn the lathe on and basically just feed it through nice and slow, and when it gets to the hole there, it should just drop right off. Okay, and that of course is going to drop down in the bottom of the lathe, and you'll have to go dig that out. Okay, so there's our bushing You are going to have a burr right there that we can put back in the lathe later on and use a spot drill or a countersink bit to cut that off and do whatever we got to do to that. So now that puts us back to make our second bushing. Should go a little faster this time. So we're just going to bring that out of the chuck a little farther. I'll just say repeat.
Okay.
Okay, so you get your cutting tool back in and you're just going to repeat everything after the drilling steps to get your second bushing. Okay, and that after you finish that, we're going to go on to the two little barrel trunnions and get those to their correct length.